What up, Moist Nation? Welcome to MicMe TV episode 5. I am your host, Jimmy. In this episode of MicMe TV, we're going to explore how billionaires are using AI, luxury survival bunkers, space colonization, and transhumanist fantasies to avoid the environmental collapse that they helped create. Stay tuned. Here I am in beautiful Western Michigan. This is a great day, so I figured I'd come and record the podcast outside while we still have great days, because, they might be numbered based on this latest climate report that we just got. The climate crisis is no longer a future threat, like a lot of people talk about it being this far-off projection that we're going to have to deal with, or maybe like down the road, or that our grandkids are going to have to deal with. It's here. First off, we're going to talk about breaching the threshold. I know I mentioned a 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming threshold that we passed that was set during the Paris Agreement in 2016. And this report comes from the WMO, and they're quoted in their report saying that every additional fraction of a degree of warming drives more harmful heat waves, extreme rainfall events, intense droughts, melting of ice sheets, sea ice and glaciers, heating of the ocean, and rising sea levels, the WMO report said. And when I read that quote, all I can think about is the squirrel in Ice Age and how we're all going to turn into him. And it's not going to be another ice age. It's going to be like a ice melt, where everything is dead. That squirrel understands the struggle. That was honestly the best part of Ice Age, when they would bring that squirrel out and he would go like, oh my God. And there'd always be that crack that he would make in the ice, and then he'd have to outrun it, and he'd create some giant butterfly effect that would ruin the whole environment. It's pretty awesome. Honestly, in that regard, he's like a perfect comparison or metaphor for humanity, because he not only was searching for that minuscule amount of food like we may be doing in the future based on these projections, but he also messed up his environment for everybody else, which is what we are definitely doing based on that 70% of biodiversity lost in the last 50 years. But I digress. Let's get into it. So the Paris Accord. The Paris Accord was a meeting between, I believe, 195 nations, and what the general consensus that came out of this meeting is we need to keep warming well below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius from that pre-industrial measured baseline. Remember, we talked about that, the 1850 to 1900 baseline? So a series of agreements were made at this Paris Accord meeting, and the basic consensus of these agreements were that we as a world are going to work to limit fossil fuel production and encourage economic benefits for alternative energy production. So if that means like tax exemptions or government investment in alternative energy, all that good stuff, a lot of that was supposed to be pushed coming out of this. And they chose that 1.5 degrees Celsius number because it was a target that would ideally avoid the worst effects of climate change. This wasn't like once we hit 1.5, it's Armageddon and the world ends. It was more like, let's try our best as a world to not hit there, so we don't have to deal with the, food shortages, displacement when it comes to coastal communities, all that stuff. So this report that just came out that basically told us 2024 was the hottest year on record, and that we passed this pre-industrial baseline by 1.55 degrees Celsius. It comes at a time when 180 of these 195 nations that initially agreed to this accord haven't submitted their their next round of nationally determined contributions or climate plans for the next 5 years. Or I'm sorry, for 2031 to 35. So for the back 5 years of the next 10 years. And so it's very symbolic of the collapse of our international consensus to do anything about climate change, I would say. And that's pretty scary and sad. It seems like, and we're going to get into this next, that because of China and America's actions per se, and since they're the two largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, and they're not really scaling back as they should be, I don't think the rest of the world is going to make the difference that it will take to actually stay, underneath these projections that will lead to even worse climate problems. So Now that we kind of covered a little bit about the Paris Accord, we understand that we've exceeded this 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, and the the trajectory of these graphs is that it's only going to get worse as time goes on. I want to talk a little bit about who caused it, and this comes down to the private sector and the public sector, right? This comes down to politicians and companies. And since America and China are the largest two contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, I mean, it's fitting to talk about them anyway. So Trump initially pulled out of the Paris Agreement when he won the election in 2016. Biden rejoined the Paris Agreement during his term from 2020 to 2024, but when Trump got elected again in 2024, he pulled out of the Paris Agreement, and so he was actually quoted as such for why he did this. And I quote, "I'm immediately withdrawing from the unfair one-sided Paris Climate Accord ripoff. The United States will not sabotage our own industries while China pollutes with impunity." And so to kind of go off of what he's talking about, China's the largest emitter of carbon dioxide gas in the world. They emitted 11,903 million metric tons in 2023. And as these measurements about the world's hottest year on record coming out in 2024, you know, the largest polluters of 2023, you want to focus on those. So in second place, not far behind, comes the United States. We're the second largest emitter of carbon dioxide, CO2. So, and we are with 4,911 million metric tons in total carbon dioxide emissions in 2023. So while we're in second place, we're still not even half of what China's emitting. And, you know, what's interesting about this is that Trump is pulling out of the Paris Agreement, but China is still in it and is still kind of like embracing the optics of such because, you know, while they're still investing in alternative energy, as we can see in 2023, they're the largest emitter of carbon dioxide gas in the world by twofold and even more. So they're kind of trying to play both sides. And at this current moment, China's climate and energy policies aren't expected to be strong enough to drive down emissions in a substantial manner this decade that would like result in what the Paris Accord, you know, was searching for to keep this warming, well, now under 2 degrees Celsius optimally. But shoot, I mean, I don't know what they're gonna, once they have another meeting and kind of decide, you know, this future framework, I don't know what their number is going to be because it's going to have to be realistic. And I don't see any way that we can stay underneath. I mean, 1.5 for sure we're going to pass, but 2, I mean, I don't see how we're not going to pass that. Out of the Paris Accord, each country that signed up for this agreement was given emission reductions that were like a set of emission reductions that were required to keep the world from passing this threshold. So there was this, what they call it, a fair share amount of emission reduction that you would have to hit. And if all countries agreed to do their fair share, then we would keep warming under that threshold rate, under that 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial measurement. And so even though China on the surface seems to be investing in these alternative energy solutions, on the flip side, they aren't aligning with the emission reductions that are required or put in place or suggested by the Paris Accord to keep us globally under that threshold. And so that leaves me with the question, and I think it leaves all of you with the question, if China and America aren't fully committed to solving the climate crisis, does anything really even matter? Because we look at these numbers. I mean, what is this? 12,000 million metric tons plus another 5,000. So 17,000 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emitted in 2023. And you're telling us that we need to forego plastic straws at Starbucks? I mean, it's ridiculous when, you know, a snap of a billionaire's fingers when it comes to like maybe one of these new like like data centers that Elon Musk is building for AI in Memphis, or when it comes to like private jet usage for Taylor Swift to go, visit her concerts all around the world. When a snap of these rich people's fingers results in a lifetime of a normal person's energy usage, don't expect normal people to forego what they already have in a limited sense. Most people aren't living beyond their energy needs in a global sense. In America, most people are, but in a global sense, most people aren't. And they're being asked to forego even more so billionaires can keep outrunning the gun that they're loading themselves. Let's go a little bit deeper on the business side, because we talked about America, we talked about China, we talked about sort of the policies that they're refusing to follow that were suggested at this Paris Accord meeting. But I want to get into some carbon reports that talk about the companies that are responsible for these greenhouse gas emissions. So since 1988, 100 companies are responsible for 71% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions total. And the four companies that are the highest emitting investor owned are ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, and Chevron. So these are all oil companies. These are all fossil fuel companies, companies that their health and success and, just like survival is dependent on consumers still engaging in fossil fuels. And so the really scary part comes next. And this Carbon Majors report finds that if fossil fuels continue to be extracted at the same rate over the next 28 years as they were between 1988 and 2017, global temperatures would be on course to rise by 4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. And, this is just going to lead to substantial species extinction. The rest of the biodiversity that we have, that 30%, is probably going bye-bye. And we're going to see a lot of global food scarcity. And if we haven't already moved to Mars, you're probably going to have to, or else, you're going bye-bye. Or you can live in an artificial biome of your choice for $2,099,000. Or maybe a Trump coin by that point. And so we covered the governments, right? We covered the public sector, we covered the private sector, like on a wide scale. But now I want to talk about the specific billionaires and the specific people and their carbon emitting. I know I mentioned Taylor Swift, and I mentioned Elon Musk's data center, and I'm actually going to talk about Elon Musk a little bit more. And everything that I mentioned here is fact-checked and referenced from an article by Beatrice Barros and Richard Wilk. It's the outsized carbon footprints of the super rich. And this was like a peer-reviewed study that they did. They actually went out and measured these carbon footprints against the averages of people from different nations and stuff. So Elon Musk, let's talk about him. The dude has a $432 billion net worth. He's richer than every country's economy besides 24. So he's ranked as the 25th richest country if you were going to stack them all up against each other, which is insane. And just a few examples of him contributing to global warming, despite him honestly kind of coming into the limelight like whatever it was 10 years ago when Tesla started doing well, as this kind of like tech, hybrid alternative solution guru. And now to see him flip-flop and, embrace the right wing and embrace, and I don't want to say like embrace fossil fuels again, because I don't think that's really his sector, but I think rhetorically he's changing his tune for sure. He's not saying, oh, this is an existential threat like he was back in the early days of Tesla. And so one of the things he's doing, SpaceX is developing Starship right now to transport people and equipment to the moon, and if Musk can, to colonize Mars, which is insane. He's trying to outrun this problem, this climate crisis that we're creating on Earth, and take it to Mars. And it's like, what are we going to do there on that giant rock? Live in artificial biomes that we could probably just create here? It's like, it just doesn't make sense. It's just an excuse, I think, to drive this sort of like I don't even know, like tech innovation that arguably isn't even innovation anymore. It's just like needless, like removal from human experience. It's a weird thing. And so basically, in his first test flight of Starship, energy from the rocket caused the the concrete launch pad to explode, and the spacecraft also blew up in midair. Chunks of concrete were hurled into a nesting and migration site important to some endangered species nearby, and a 3.5 acre fire chewed through Boca Chica State Park land south of the launch pad. In response, environmental groups filed a lawsuit against SpaceX and the FAA, which had authorized its launches. So that's one example of him, messing up some environmental thing. And this is all collateral damage for maybe a higher pursuit of what you could argue would be a transcendental solution to these environmental issues. But regardless, he's still blowing fire to an endangered species. And with him pushing for another orbital test flight within 1 to 2 months post-crash, SpaceX rushed to rebuild the launch pad, installing a new system to keep it from exploding again. And they did this by bypassing a permit process according to the regulators, who would have required it to meet pollutant discharge limits and say how it would treat its waste, which was water waste. So the solution that he built to his exploding launch pad that effed up an entire 3.5 acre of protected parkland was to build another, another launch pad that was even worse. So there you go. If you want to talk about his private jet flights, he's taken about 200 flights in the past year, producing over 2,500 tons of emissions, according to Mother Jones. Tesla, one Tesla factory has racked up over 110 air quality violations since 2019. That's just one Tesla factory. Investments, his stake in Tesla is responsible for an additional 80,000 tons of CO2 emissions, and his lifestyle itself, according to Mother Jones, removed from these other things mentioned, are responsible for 2,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year. And then you have his AI stuff, which with these data centers that are being built are only increasing, this energy consumption, which in turn makes these greenhouse gas emissions increase. And the space exploration aspect. And like I said, while potentially beneficial in the long run, significant short-term consequences to the environment, and just a huge demand for energy. And if we're not embracing these alternative solutions in the government, then what is the solution that would be required to fuel these trips to Mars? It's fossil fuels. And so where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? And that's where we're going to transition to segment 2, the billionaire escape plans. And this is where this episode gets really interesting, because we're now seeing a techno evasion of environmental accountability, or just accountability as a whole to the situation that these rich people have created, or that these companies or governments or whatever you want to say created. So we're going to talk about how the rich and how big tech are reacting to this problem of climate change and impending resource struggle and all these existential looming threats. They're not trying to fix the problem. They're trying to transcend it through something I want to call billionaire escapism. And this includes fun little antics such as underground bunkers, Mars colonies, and imagined Mars colonies, AI immortality, and anti-aging startups. And we're going to focus on the bunkers, because I think those are great. I think billionaire bunkers are, one of our American staples. It's a cultural staple at this point. So in a phenomenal Douglas Rushkoff article, and this came out in late 2022, so this even furthers the point that the people who are running the show kind of know what's up, and they know what their, what is it? It's, oh my God, it's like my favorite Bill Maher quote from the beginning of the movie Religulous. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. The quote is, "The only thing I like more than a prophecy is a self-fulfilling prophecy." And it's a satirical statement, but the point is we're creating a transcendental solution to a self-fulfilling prophecy. And basically what that means is that these people are trying to escape the climate collapse that they're causing. And so let's get into this article. The basis of this is Douglas Rishkov was flown out to Western America to meet 5 super wealthy guys from the upper echelon of tech investing and the hedge fund world to talk about the future of technology. And this very quickly divulged from the future of technology into more of like a questioning of Rushkov about the future of of bunker building and bunker management in post-collapse life. That's really what it turned into. It was a conversation and an inquiry around post-collapse life, post-collapse control and power. And so there was a CEO of a brokerage house there, and he explained to Rushkov how he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system. And he asked Rushkov, how do I maintain authority over my security force after the event? And this shows 2 things. Number one, a respected, smart, successful individual who's the CEO of a brokerage house and who is a billionaire. Number one, assumes that the event is forthcoming, so assumes that there will be some sort of existential event within his lifetime, and also wants to maintain his current status or his current authority over the people around him post-event, particularly his security force. These billionaires know armed guards are going to be required to protect their compounds from, everyday people, the angry mob. And it's interesting. Mentioned in the article, one of the billionaires, not this brokerage house CEO, but one of them actually secured already a dozen Navy SEALs to make their way to his personal compound if given the right cue. But this guy actually got into the weeds a little bit about post-collapse team management. And he was asking Rushkov about how he would pay the guards once his crypto was worthless. What would stop the guards from eventually choosing their own leader? And it's mentioned that the billionaires even considered using special combination locks on the food supply that only they knew. So they would take us down to our most animalistic instinct and kind of guard us and rule over us by through food. Or they would make their guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival. Or maybe if technology could get to this point before said collapse that they're all assuming will come, they could build robots to serve as guards and workers. It's pretty crazy to just look at all of these solutions that the billionaires are offering and want as these sort of isolationist technology-fueled solutions. And if not technology-fueled solutions, then at least isolationist solutions. Some of them are technology-fueled if you want to like make the robots be your guards, but it's all about how do I maintain power. And they don't even consider making good relationships now. And Rushkov mentions that in the article. He suggests to the billionaires that maybe you should do that. Maybe you should change your ways now and focus on making good relationships. And the billionaires look at him like he's naive, look at him like he's crazy. It's like, no, that won't work. Because maybe that's how the billionaires see themselves in their world. Maybe they're so deluded and so broken that they just don't believe that there's any good in humanity at all. They believe everybody's out to get them. So they treat the world as such. It could be. And so, you look at guys like Peter Thiel, you look at Elon Musk, working on things like artificial intelligence, Sam Altman, working on things like reversing the aging process, trying to upload their minds into freaking supercomputers. It seems like we're preparing for a future that has less to do with making the world a better place than it has to do with like transcending what makes life good in the first place, which is this beautiful day behind me, which is connection, emotion, not living in a post-collapse bunker that hasn't even happened yet. Why plan for something that hasn't happened yet if we can prevent it? Why not plan to prevent it? Not plan how we react to it or how to get away from it if we want to go up into space. And so, real quick, let's talk about transhumanism. This is another what I want to call what did we call it? billionaire. Let's just call this another one of our billionaire behaviors. So, transhumanism. Quick overview. Transhumanism, for short, is basically you're merging humanity with machine to overcome biological limitations such as aging, illness, even death. And examples of this that are going on right now: Neuralink, Altus Labs, cryonics, mind uploading, digital immortality, all these different things. I don't know if I pronounced cryonics right. I hope I did. But I want to extend this discussion into like the false promise of innovation, the false promise of specifically tech innovation, because I don't think AI and bunkers and these rockets to Mars are about saving humanity. It's about preserving wealthy individuals. And if you want to extend it to national security, competing with the threat of China and its military. Because if they're not going to scale down, then we can't either. So I get that on one extent. But we can have our cake and eat it too. We can scale down globally and listen to this Paris Accord while still investing in our military, keeping our national security in check and making sure that we are up to date with China. And I know that gets complicated because I can start talking about AI, progression and the energy required for that, and how AI can be used for good, but then can also be used for military. And if China's going to have these big AI leaps forward in military capability, America will probably have to match that to preserve our way of life. So I get that. But at the same time, to see both China and America, who are on these different sides of the global coin in terms of like approaches to government and life itself, both rejecting this Paris Agreement, it doesn't bode well for our future. I think it bodes well for, I don't know, these billionaires trying to escape their humanity. It leads me to this like overall ethical and maybe like ecological question, which is like, is the future just for rich people digitizing themselves while the planet burns? And maybe digitizing isn't the right word, but just like transcending the human experience through exorbitant amounts of money and scientific experiments that aren't contributing to public well-being anymore. Right? Because that's the argument. It's like you're causing a climate collapse. You're generating massive amounts of money, but it's staying in the hands of the few. And so for the everyday people who aren't in tech, who maybe aren't experiencing the growth in their sector, their dollar isn't working as hard as it used to, so they're struggling. And so you're who are we helping? And it's not just me making this argument, it's the billionaires themselves who are planning private underground fortresses instead of planning community rebuilding projects. They're enforcing this view. And so to close, we have to talk about the real human future. We don't need to upgrade our bodies. We need to confront our values. The human condition isn't something to fix. It's a responsibility that we have to face. And if the earth dies, there's no respawn button or an app we can download to reinstall it. And so while the billionaires in techno land play imaginary whatever, in their VR, AR spaces with every acronym in the book now, you got AI, whatever. It's like, just look outside. Look at this beautiful day. Look at this tree above me. Look at the sun in my face. It's all really beautiful. And I don't want to go to Mars. I want to be right here. And I want to make sure that my kids are right here. And I don't want my kids to be in a bunker from a self-induced, self-fulfilling prophecy. All right. That was the MicMe TV show, episode 5. I hope you enjoyed. I had a great time doing this episode. Let me know if you like this new format where I kind of have an outline to keep me more on track. This one was more scripted and less like free flowing than the others, but I thought this went well. I like recording outside. Might do this again. As always, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Love you all. Stay moist and